Hi, so this is a set of the series of tutorials about Java using the KISS framework. This one doesn't specifically have to do with KISS, although we're going to use a KISS application to illustrate it, and that is version control. So when you're writing software, you have to change and edit usually multiple source files. Right now we only have one. Here's our hi with a test program that tests whether or not this little method here produces what we expect, and this is the test here, and here's how it runs. Um, and in real applications, and certainly very quickly for you, you're going to go through very many different versions we have already of different versions of the software that is hopefully, as time progresses, more and more capable of doing the things that you want it to do, with more and more tests that illustrate the fact that it does in fact do the things that you want it to do. Um, but management of that in the modern world requires the idea of version control. So version control is sort of unbelievably necessary when more than one person is working on a project. But even when you're working by yourself on a project, being able to go back to old versions and comparing new versions to old versions to see what you changed pretty quickly becomes indispensable. And so let me just show you that NetBeans has an integrated version control tool called Git, G-I-T, which is immensely popular. You can get online versions of these repositories in case you lose your data, but right now I'm just going to use the NetBeans version of Git to help you get started with version control. So here's the Hi application, and so in here under Hi, the project, oh sorry, I believe we start over here. So under team, even though you're a team of one at the moment, there's a Git, and there's other versions of version control available. I'll say Git is just by far the most popular. So right now we're going to initialize a repository, which is a place where the different versions of your software is stored, and it's stored right alongside with your project, but all the various old and new versions are kept together. So initialize repository, and then it should be that the repository just lives in the same folder that the actual project lives in, and that's the default here, so I can just say OK. So give it a moment, and it should have a configured repository. So there's not very much of a difference. So there's just a little blue thing next to the project. That's an indication that for some reason this little, what looks like a soup can, is the can that holds your data, I think is the idea of that little icon. So these are under version control, but now you need to start following some of the details of version control. So not all pieces of your application are source files, and so the first step you need to take is to actually add the source files that matter to you into the version control. So what you can do is right-click on the app.java. That's the source file, that the only one we have right now, and git add. So we're going to add that file into our source file set. So now we have app added, and then we're going to commit our first adjustment into that. So git and then commit. Once we add it is just marking it as something we would like to do version control on, and commit is okay. So now you could add multiple files, but now that you have added the things you want to commit to changes into your version control, you commit them, and it is absolutely worth spending a moment and think of a useful sentence. So initial commit is a perfectly good one, I think, for this case. So my initial commit is the initial source file. Here checked off is what I'm adding to the repository, and click commit. And that's just a little local folder that has a representation of that current version of the application. And so I've just committed my initial version. If I go look, before this was green, now it's black. So like there's nothing sort of out of whack with respect to what this is at compared to my Git version. All right. So now let's do some change. So let's maybe start another test. This is the test of hi. So let's like create a test, void test version. How about test some math? So we'll make a very simple math test illustrating arithmetic. So 1 plus 1 should be equal to, and Java use double equals for comparing values, so 1 plus 1 should equal 2. And that's a little test. And I'll save that, and I guess it passes that test. That's good. So I have a new test. So I made a little progress. In this case, I guess I learned a little bit about how to write math notation in Java. I have a little test, and notice this has gone from black to blue. And look, if I am me highlighting it, says, oh, it's been modified compared to the version that's in there. So let me just make a commit of it since I feel like I made progress, and it's the progress I want to remember. So I go in there to Git and add that file, and then Git and commit it. So adding it is just marking it as this is a change that I want to remember with a particular message with a commit. So you can have several files you edit and all together represent one commit into the repository with one commit message. In our case, we only have one file, so we're only going to commit one file at a time. That's our only option. So test math and then commit. Okay, so we have a change, and so let's go ahead and try to compare, for example. So let's kind of try to see how things have progressed in our application. So here, if I right-click on the source file, go down to Git, I can compare, and that's called making differences. So diff, and let's just go diff2 ... so we can choose what we want to compare to. So we're in the master branch. There's different sort of branches you can create, and by default you get the master branch. That's something you can change later. But down here, so revision select, so I can select which thing I would like to compare to. So let's compare it to the initial commit that we did. So I select that, like that. And now I have a particular revision that I'm looking at, and I hit diff, and then apparently, oh, I guess I changed a couple things here. So I have an edited close bracket there, but the most important thing is I tested some math, which has been inserted. So here's the old version, the initial commit version, and then this is called a working tree, the thing that I'm working on right now, and it shows me what I put in there compared to the old version, and that can be really useful. If you add or remove lines, then you can find out. I guess let's get rid of this diff, and now I'll delete something out of here so I can just see what that looks like. So I added something there. So what might be, there's really, we're going to end up breaking a test, but let's get rid of that print name line. So now there's less in that part of our program, and save that. And now do the same sort of diff idea. So app, and then git diff, diff2, so I can actually pick out which one I'm interested in. So compared to my initial diff again, and so now I see that compared to the initial commit, I actually removed a line, and I can figure out what line it was that was removed. And also down here, here's some green insertions that happened in the new version. So those sorts of comparisons are super useful when you're going through the application progress. You might try something and realize it's a bad idea, and you want to go back to some version that had an older idea that worked better. And you can use this to compare old and new versions and commit those changes, and that way you can revert back to old versions. You can copy paste. So if I want this print statement back in my new code, I can grab it from my diff. Notice this says diff. Go up here and then just paste it back in and format it back up, and then save that. And now I have a version that has that name back in there, which might have been very hard to reproduce. It was sort of a complicated bit of code that I didn't remember exactly how I created. By having it in a repository, I can compare it and then save those versions. Once I get to a version that I like that has the parts that I want that are new, then of course I can commit it. And by the way, you can commit versions that don't actually work. Like if it's got little errors in it and things like that, that doesn't mean that you can't just add it to the repository. You can still add parts that are broken in the hopes that eventually they will get better. Commit, and then fixed, print, and then amend last commit. I guess we didn't do any real changes, so I didn't notice that there was anything that was different. So it's because we actually put right back the thing that we took out. Get notices the differences between files if you ended up not making anything, even though I edited it all back exactly the way it was, and so there was really no difference to commit at that point. So there is the absolute fundamental core parts of Git. I think it is so useful that you really should not write very much code before you get used to the idea of having some version control behind you to be able to go back to different versions. Copying files is a pretty terrible old school way of doing version control. Git is very popular. It's a very important just skill set to know how Git works, and Git is reasonably complicated. There's a bunch of tutorials and resources on learning how to use Git, a lot better than what this little start is like. I hope you spend some time and start to learn it. The other part I really think you should do is create an online version of a repository in case you lose, say you lose or break your desktop or laptop. It's nice to be able to get back to the things that you've lost. There are online tools to help you save those repositories and have access to them later. Two very popular resources would be GitHub, GITHUB, which is where actually the KISS libraries are kept, right? And then another one is called Bitbucket. And so I strongly recommend you create an account on one or both of those and get in the habit of using them and learning these Git tools. It is an absolutely great job skill, and during your school career it will save you so much time trying to remember where you're at and where you're going to for building software and getting it all right in the end. So enjoy Git. It's very much worth it. Even though it isn't specifically related to KISS framework, it is a fundamental part of software development. All right, that's it.